Hi, everybody. My name is Pat, and for 10 years, I've been raising and training pigeons on my roof in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and I still am. But currently, the pigeons have relocated to this kind of bunker of a coop that I built a few weeks ago up at our barn studio in the Catskills. But all the birds are here, and I guess we're gonna talk about all things pigeon, and I guess kind of like some basic stuff, but also like the New York style, because it's very much a New York thing. So that's the coop there. I guess we'll just go inside. Good. Y'all can hear me and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is something like 125 pigeons that in the city I have living in 3 different coops up on the roof. And each coop is more or less the size of this space. So everyone's a little bit like cluster crammed in right now. I mean, it's like happy and healthy, you know, there's like 2 perches for every bird. This is like not a gnarly situation or anything, but normally like coops are separated by breed and by different things. I'll talk about the different kinds of pigeons and stuff, but right now everyone's all living together. And I have what pigeon guys call scrambled eggs, and that's when you have many different breeds and you can't stick with one. Like a lot of guys, old timers mainly, they'll go up on their roof and they'll have 300 or 400 pigeons that are all identical, the same color, the same wings, the same black dot on their head, and you can't tell any of them apart. And I have what's kind of like a little fringe, but scrambled eggs where all different kinds, all different colors. And a lot of them kind of also mix together. Like I have a lot of mutts or crossbreeds, which is kind of cool, but also kind of fringe in the New York community, I guess. But yeah, I'll just do a quick show of everyone. And there's this little aviary that kind of shows you a little bit where we are. We're in a little farm town called Andes in the Catskills, and this is the tiny farm we're starting. Ultimately, it'd be cool to live here all the time and have like, you know, thousands of pigeons and like peacocks and stuff walking around, but we're still working up to that. But I guess I'll start by talking about like the who, where, how, or why of keeping pigeons, or just generally like where pigeons come from. So pigeons were first domesticated in Sumeria 8,000 years ago, like the Middle East, modern Iraq, and they were domesticated at first for food, and then very quickly after, it was figured out that pigeons can return home from anywhere. So very early on, people started using pigeons to deliver mail and courier messages. Like, you know, 4,000 BC, they were doing that. And then as humanity moved across the world, you know, pigeons went with people. So they went, you know, east to China, they went to Africa, they went to Europe. And then when the Europeans came to USA, whenever, they brought pigeons with them, and they brought domestic pigeons, not wild birds, but domestic pigeons that were used for food. And pigeons the world round in any environment have proven a knack for escaping their human captors and kind of finding harmony with wherever they live and going feral and doing really well. Obviously, you know, like pigeons live everywhere. They're ubiquitous with every city. And all of those birds are great, great, great descendants of domestic birds. And with that, all around the world, every civilization, people have continued the practice of keeping pigeons and raising them for sports, but mainly for a kind of like for pleasure, like the, you know, kind of art of watching them fly and kind of working with them to make them as healthy and happy as they can be so they fly super well, because it's a spectacular thing to watch. Our pigeons fly far more acrobatically than street pigeons. Yeah, I heard someone say something. No?
No, but what's the difference between street pigeons and your pigeons?
Well, they're the same species. They're the same, only different. Kind of like how street dogs look similar the world round, you know, like little street dogs kind of look the same, whether you're in Seattle or Mexico or Timbuktu, you know, the little pointy ears and the curly tail and that same kind of stubby size. But then you also have Chihuahuas and Great Danes and the like. And, you know, those dogs could all have babies together. It's just the difference, I guess, is that through human guidance or intervention, they maintain their breeds, or they maintain the certain traits that you get through, I don't know, mating with other guys that look like that.
So,
and with that, kind of like how some dog breeds have incredible traits. There's a whole range of traits, you know, like there are dogs that are really fast, or there are dogs that swim, or there are dogs that just kind of like look wildly interesting. The same in the world of pigeons. You have pigeons that fly in several different ways, or you have pigeons that just look like something out of a Bosch painting. And then different localities or different places have different interests with the pigeons, you know, like in different countries, people not only have different breeds, but they have different, you know, they want birds that fly really, really high, or they want birds that fly really, really far, or they want beauty queens. You know, there's a whole world of interest there.
I think someone else had a question that was asking. I don't know.
Yeah. Does everyone know how to unmute themselves if they want to? Or are you the master of the mute?
Okay, yeah, I think that like you answered the same question.
What was the question? I answered the question? Or should I do it better?
I had a question about if there were just specific discernible breeds of pigeons, but I think you kind of answered it.
Yes, there are in fact more breeds of pigeon than there are breeds of dog, cat, and horse put together. There are thousands of breeds of pigeon. And I guess just to try to quickly explain that, pigeons have many traits that are conducive to the kind of like backyard genealogist. The first 2 chapters of Darwin's Origin of Species are him recounting being in his mom's backyard in the west of England as a kid, and kind of playing with fantail pigeons and breeding pigeons. And so it's like pigeons have all these traits. Pigeons always mate for life, and they're kind of like rabbits, where they really love to raise families and have babies. So, gosh, where to begin? Okay, so pigeons mate for life, and you could kind of make any boy and girl, any cock and hen pigeon fall in love by separating them together, taking them together, and putting them alone somewhere for a couple days. After a couple days, those birds they'll be married. They'll be linked up. You could bring them back into the big flock or whatever with thousands of birds around. Their ex-lovers could be around, but they'll be paired up with that new partner, and they'll immediately start laying eggs. And they do this. They're really good parents. They build the nest 50-50. They do it really quick. They do it with whatever's available. You know, they'll even pull feathers off each other's tails if they have to like make a quickie nest out of feathers. They'll kiss for a while. You can always tell when they're gonna screw, because first they kiss. They literally like go beak to beak and make out. Like you might see that at some point. And then they make love or whatever, and they pretty much instantly drop 2 eggs. Pigeons always lay 2 eggs. It's always a boy and a girl. They sit on the eggs. They take turns sitting on the eggs for 3 weeks. And on the 21st day, the eggs both hatch, one a little bit before the other. And then for the first week, it's actually the male that feeds the babies. It's one of the few species of animal where the male makes the milk or makes the cream. He makes like it is, almost akin to like a mammal's milk. It's like a creamy thing he makes in his first tummy. And he feeds that to the babies for the first week. And then for the next few weeks, the parents take turns just feeding them regurgitated seed. And the babies, I'll show you an egg. So this is a pigeon egg, and it's itty bitty, far smaller than a golf ball. This will hatch in a couple weeks, and you can imagine like a little tiny pigeon that comes out of this. In 4 weeks, it'll look like any old pigeon you see on the street. They grow up really quick, and that's kind of why people never really see baby pigeons like in the city. It's because they grow up so quick, and then they're flying. The day they leave the nest, they're flying and they're on their own from their parents. They'll kind of stick together with their sibling, with their brother or sister, their nestmate. They'll stick together for the first few months. And then after that, they're kind of like hot to trot and looking to have babies themselves. So kind of you have all these set controls in their breeding. So if you want, any regular person, you don't have to be a master biologist. You could kind of start, if you want, you could breed for certain traits very quick. And in a year, you could have, 6 generations of birds, starting with the first couple pairs. And you could kind of, the way you could pair them together, if you want, you could go for certain traits. You could go for, I want yellow, or I want red, or I want crazy hairdos, or feathery feet, or all these things. So that's how you wind up with so many breeds. You think about dogs again, like to develop a breed of dogs takes like generations and generations and of people, not just generations of dogs, like it's hard for one person to do that. But with pigeons, like, again, like a regular person, give them 10 years and you could kind of invent your own, subtle, but your own breed of the animal.
So if they mate for life, does that mean that you have a lot of couples there? There's a lot of like married couples in your...
Yeah. Here, so let's I'll show you some married couples. This is a couple. So, and I should say, I very rarely pair birds together. Like, I don't do that, like, playing God thing that I just described, which is really normal. I don't know, but I'm like whatever. I don't do that. I kind of let, like, who love be love, with the exception of birds that are given to me by, like, older, more respected pigeon keepers, in which case it would be hugely disrespectful of me to let, like, some bird from some guy's bloodline mix with some, poodle or whatever. Like, that would be... So with that exception, I kind of let nature take its course. And sometimes you get really lucky. Like, you see that couple right there, those 2 dotted birds? Those are both almond rollers. And that is like, that's a superstar couple. That's a really, to a pigeon keeper, that's a really special bird, that white one with all the dots. And that one's parents actually came to me from, like, some Jedi master pigeon keeper called Broadway Benny in Bushwick, who was one of the guys that kind of put me on a long time ago. So that's really exciting to see those birds get together. And I'll try to find some other. So the pairs are the ones, generally speaking, that are all sitting together, like these are, oh shoot, all right, I guess I can't get too close. Those were pepperhead tiplets. So there's a pair right there. There's that black one with a solid white head, kind of like a bald head eagle. That's called a bald head roller. And that color is kind of like a charcoal. And she's got an interesting husband, that solid white guy right there. He's called an old Dutch capuchin by breed. And I'm really into the capuchins. They're kind of pretty rare, at least in New York. And they fly really well for how weird they are, but they've got those incredible boa hairdos. I've got a bunch of them. And I'll show you. So now I'll find some of their kids. Like this white one right there. You see how she's white like them, but she only has like a little bit of a cowlick. She doesn't have the full, like, hairdress. Or here's another interesting pair. So that solid black one on the right, that kind of looks a little bit like a street pigeon. That's actually a pretty all-star homing pigeon, like a racing pigeon. I don't race them, but that's just like a fast bird. Like it might just kind of look like an everyday, but that bird could do like 80 miles an hour. And his wife is that big, poofy, funny colored one right there. That's an Egyptian swift, which is also a pretty oddball breed for these parts. But let me show you the swift. She's interesting. Egyptian swifts have the longest or the widest wingspan of any pigeon. So I don't know if it's hard to tell without comparison. Here you go. But her wings are, where's the camera? Get the camera. Her wings are gigantic. Like a normal pigeon's wings come here to my pointer finger. Hers are a good 3 inches longer. Egypt has an incredible contemporary pigeon flying scene. I mean, historically, it's awesome. But the current one is really cool. They built crazy coops in Cairo up on top of the high rises in like the urban sections of Cairo. You know, 6-story building. On top of that, they put these 3-story scaffolding structures made out of bamboo with a pigeon coop, a bamboo pigeon coop on the tip top of that. And these things like dot the skyline. It's incredible. It's worth a Google image search.
If anyone, hold on one second, Pat. If anyone has any questions, please just like unmute yourself.
Yes.
I see the Munir as a question. If you have any question, just say unmute yourself and shoot.
Hey Pat, thank you so much. I was actually in Cairo recently and I saw that that you're talking about. It's really incredible.
Yeah.
And yeah, around sunset, people are flying their birds from those stilted structures. Mm-hmm. It's really incredible. I wanted to ask, what is pigeon flying season? You know, when does it typically start? When does it end? Is there sort of a seasonal turn to things, or is it pretty uniform throughout the year in New York?
Yeah. Yes, there's a season, and there's a season both for, you know, there are kind of seasons to it if you are alone on a farm somewhere raising pigeons, which there are, you know, people doing the world round. But then there are more kind of defined seasons to it when you do it communally, like we do in Brooklyn or in the Bronx or in Cairo, where it's a real social sport or a real social hobby because you're flying pigeons. Similar a little bit to graffiti writing, to traditional graffiti writing. Like graffiti writers make their art in public kind of for the general public, but first and foremost for other graffiti writers. Pigeon flyers love to fly their pigeons for other pigeon flyers, so guys often congregate in the same neighborhood, which is how, you know, Bushwick is a particular mecca. Bushwick is the biggest pigeon flying neighborhood in the city, and it has been for a few generations now. And in Cairo, the same, you know, guys like to see each other's birds flying, and, you know, in some places you're just kind of like competing for style, like who's fly the best or who's fly the fastest or who's for the highest, or fly the longest. That's the Bronx game, how long they fly. But a game we play both in New York and in Cairo is called Catch Keep, where we try to kind of catch each other's birds. So you want your flock to be flying at the same time as the next guy's flocks, and you kind of hope the wind or whatever variable kind of mixes the flocks up in the air. And then everyone has a distinct whistle for calling your birds back, you know, like chow time whistle. So once the birds mix, like everyone on the roof, you know, you'll be like a few blocks apart here and there, but Bushwick, there's a lot of pigeon coops. And everyone's wailing on their whistle, you know, and they're kind of trying to call them back because you want them to kind of break off some of the other guys' stock and bring them back to yours. And that's how, you know, Catch Keep is the name of the game. But depending on your relation, you know, maybe you can like sell them back or give them back if it's a younger guy. And in that case, it's all about the season is the mid to late summer into the fall, you know, kind of like the best season for being outdoors in general in New York. And it's definitely like the magic hour is the time where, like, especially in New York, like if you have birds in Bushwick and it's an August Sunday afternoon and your birds aren't up in the air, you're like going down on the totem. like people will talk shit about you at the pet shop like that week because your birds weren't in the air, or you will get like a furious phone call from a neighbor who's, you know, another lonely pigeon keeper who's just like wants so badly for your birds to go up, to have like the community aspect of it is super important to the city guys. You guys get really competitive just because that's kind of the nature of like guys get competitive for better.
So
worse,
now,
you know?
now that you're upstate, are you flying the pigeons there?
No, so I don't know. So there's this little aviary, you know, I'm just giving them, letting them see the lay of the land. But I don't want to fly them out of this like kind of fallout shelter of a coop that I'm standing in now. First, in a week, I'm going to build them a proper coop outside, and, you know, build kind of like the epic fantasy coop that I've wanted to build for a long time, but, you know, couldn't because I was busy with life and like not being in quarantine or whatever. And then from that coop, I'm going to start flying birds. Most of my birds, like 100 out of 125, are either rollers or tiplets or flights, or all these breeds that fly kind of locally and fly acrobatically and do like kind of tricks and stuff. I have like 20 or 30 birds that are called, they're homers, homing pigeons, carrier pigeons, whatever you want to call them. And those guys, I can't fly them here, whether I let them out now or whether I let them out 2 years from now after living here. They will always fly back to where they were born. It's kind of, it's one of those cool, curious, scientific unknowns, kind of like how cats purr. Like, no one really knows how a homing pigeon can fly home. Like, you could take a homing pigeon 1,000 miles in any direction from where they were born, and they'll just figure it out, and they'll just get there, like, in a day.
So they would just go back to Bushwick at this point.
Yeah, like, there's, like I said, 20 or 30 of them, like, and they're big. They're big and surly, the homing pigeons.
Like I think that there's somebody that's watching that also has a pigeon, Sylvia.
Oh, hell yeah.
Like
I see it now. Oh, that's awesome. That's a house bird?
Hold on, Sylvia, you're muted. Yes.
Okay, I think I unmuted it now.
Yeah, I can
this is Coco. She's a little squirmy right now, but she's from the Wild Bird Fund. I adopted her.
That
3
place
years
is
ago.
incredible. That place is so unique and wonderful, and Miss Rita's a dream, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I have yet to volunteer there. I would really like to, but I was very interested in adopting a pigeon for a long time, and
very cool.
Finally did it.
That's super cool.
But yeah, I assume she's just a street pigeon, but I was told that she was previously owned by someone else who supposedly became allergic, developed an allergy, so they put her up for adoption. So I don't really know that much about her history, to be honest. But she's very easy to handle, very friendly, so it's clear that she was raised by people. You can really tell.
Yeah, and she's just, are you holding her, or will she fly away if you let her go?
She might go on my head. She likes to hang out on my head. But I see her eyeing the spot in the corner that she likes to go to also.
That's so cool. I have some house birds, like, at this point, I have some other funny, like, finches and doves and things. I've had house pigeons, and it's a wild lifestyle. Like, you come home from a hard day at work, you open the door, and it just comes right to your face from across the room. Like, they have to be on your shoulder, or they have to be in your...
Yeah. Well, I actually keep her in, like, a really big dog crate. So she doesn't just, like, fly to me when I get home, but you can tell that she wants attention. She'll be in there with wings, or just
awesome.
like, hi. She'll make noise sometimes too. It's very cute.
Super cool. I think, like, one of my goals or dreams or anything about talking to all you guys about pigeons is, and maybe you're a great example of this, it's really easy to have a house pigeon. They're really easy to get and maintain and live with, and, like, way easier than a dog. And
yes, absolutely. I'd say they're akin to a cat, almost. In that, you know, sometimes they'll be super affectionate, and other times they'll, like, just want to do their own thing.
Yeah.
So in that way, they're very similar to a cat.
the way I got into pigeon keeping was like 10 years ago. I moved in. I mean, I didn't even really move in. I moved onto the couch and kind of like a scuzzy apartment in Bushwick. And across the street was a pigeon pet shop. And it's now I know it's the only pigeon pet shop in Brooklyn. Right. And I just went in there one day because, you know, I grew up in the suburbs. I knew people kept pigeons, but I never really thought of it. It was just kind of like, oh, yeah, that's the thing. And I just went in there out of like kind of bored curiosity and fell in love with everything and all the weirdos and the dusty old timers I was talking to. And it was for a suburban kid, such a raw slice of New York, like, you know, all these thick accented guys. And they kind of, you know, in the front of that shop, it's all feed and medicine and whatever. And the back, they have this big room with like hundreds of pigeons at any given time, you know, all different breeds, all different prices or whatever. But they showed me the cutest, this like white bird with a little bit of red on his face. And they're like, oh, this is a roller. He does backflips when he flies.
Oh, wow.
You could, oh, nice. Yeah, that's what it's like to live with a pigeon.
Yeah, exactly.
But, and they could be yours for $5. And I was like, oh my God, you know, and I gave the guy $5 and he put the bird in a paper bag with a little hole poked in the side. And it was like, and I just one bird for months, you know, and, you know, it was just like living kind of like not a dog cage, but the same size, you know, just like I had this little thing. And with one, if they're kind of easy to train to like, almost potty train them sort of, but you know, they know where our food is and they know to like, when you put food, they go back in at night and they fly around. And then it was, eventually I kind of put a tiny coop on the roof and got like a couple more, you know, over the course of like a year. And, I don't know, after the first couple years, then it kind of snowballed and I got the bug like most people get and like, you know, started building big coops and like raising birds and stuff. But it is super easy to either visit the Wild Bird Fund on, 86 in Columbus. It's an incredible place. And it's like the kind of place you want. It's like a free clinic, no questions asked for any kind of bird. It's kind of one of its kind, not just in the city, but like in anywhere. And you walk in this place and they've got like some fancy pigeons up front, but there'll be like a pelican walking around on the floor and like a crow in an arm cast on a bookshelf. And like people just kind of, you know, what have you got? And I've brought them all kinds of like injured birds that I've found and stuff. And they always help the animal and then they follow through with you like weeks later, you know, and they tell you what happened to it. It's a wonderful place. And yeah, you could adopt pigeons from there, or you could go to one of the pigeon shops. There's one in Brooklyn, one in Bronx, two in Queens, and you know, a few bucks and you could kind of like start with a bird.
At the Wild Bird Fund, it's completely free. At the Wild Bird Fund, it's completely free.
They're free, yeah.
Can I ask, are they supportive generally of the pigeon breeding, like on rooftops and your sports sort of? Are they
bird funds? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. And I don't want to speak out of turn about someone else's perspective because they are, but they're also not with every pigeon keeper. I guess I've learned from it, like there are some pigeon keepers they love and there are some that are like a little to them. But generally, yeah, like they, you know, they've given me or allowed me to adopt street pigeons before knowing I'm a pigeon keeper, you know, and my kind of main mentor, like the pigeon keeper that really like took me under his wing and taught me all my shit. He was really close with Rita and with the bird funds, and he was like he was like a kind of advisor at large, you know, like they would call him for pigeon medical questions or whatever, or like he was the one who got them to use bricks in all their little coops so the pigeons could be standing on bricks instead of standing on flat stainless steel because it's nice for the, I don't know. So they're good with some pigeon keepers, but others I've heard stories about them being not so cool with. And they mainly deal with street pigeons, what they adopt. But they do have domestics that have somehow, you know, wound up there. But for most pigeon keepers, like a kind of rooftop pigeon keeper, you're your own doctor, and everyone becomes their own veterinarian, and that's just kind of part of the necessary systems that you learn to manage, and all different kinds of illness, and there's tons of different medicines and expense,
how many
time.
years? How many years does is the usual like life of a pigeon?
I think they like average life. It's like 3 to 13 years or something. Like there's this huge window. I have tons of birds that are like pushing 10 years old. And I've also seen many birds, you know, get sick and die when they're less than a year old. But I think, and it's also kind of different domestic pigeons versus street pigeons. I have no idea actually how long street pigeons really make it for. Like street pigeons are kind of tanks, and are really good at staying alive. But it also kind of hard to imagine them, a lot of them living to be 10 years old. I think my oldest bird is 10. And then most people expect them to live at least 5-6 years. You know, it's kind of like a tragedy when they don't make it 5 or 6.
And how difficult? Oh yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
I was gonna ask just like how difficult was it to learn how to fly them, and how long does it take? Just that.
I don't know. I guess it's pretty difficult. It took a long time. It's kind of like it's a real slow bird, because it's like it's the kind of hobby that you have to deal with every single day of your life. For obvious reasons, you know, you get in the business of managing life and being responsible for life. Like that's something that, you know, even if you have the most wildly busy of a day and there's crazy rain and you got to be somewhere, like you still have to spend your 30 minutes on the roof to like feed them and give them water and maintain and let them in if there's a storm, or let them out, whatever, fly them. So I don't know, you feel like you kind of get like a solid grip on it after a year, but kind of like everything, like once you feel like you got a grip, there's like a whole new, it's the learning curve, you know, there's a whole new thing you got to learn and a whole new thing. But probably like most things, it's like, you know, 5 years in, you kind of start to get it, you know, and 20 years in, I presume no one can fuck with you anymore. Like you're kind of Jedi after 20 years. I'm 32 and considered a youngster in the New York pigeon keeping game. There are younger guys, but most guys are like in their 40s, if not elderly at this point. But you know,
yeah. Is the city supportive of the hobby? You know, I can imagine that with the sort of developers and sort of the forces of gentrification, especially in Bushwick and parts of Brooklyn, that there's a lot of pressure on, you know, pigeon coops to sort of relocate or move out. Can you talk about sort of who the main forces are in terms of, you know, trying to keep people flying and keep people invested in this, and on the other hand, pushing them out and sort of paving the way for that new money to come in?
Sure. Well, I think historically, you know, like pigeon keeping really got going in the city 100 years ago. And it originally really got going with Italian and Polish immigrants, Jewish immigrants. And from starting with them up until, I don't know, 20 years ago, landlords used to really appreciate having a pigeon keeper up on their roof, because it would be like a de facto superintendent, you know, someone to like keep things together. And, you know, normally you would kind of pay your rent. The way I pay my rent for my roof is I just like fix up things around the house. And that's like, you know, there's a standard of that, where it's like you know, if you're an individual landlord or a family landlord, it's nice to have someone who's up there and making sure the roof doesn't leak, and who's like handling deliveries for you. And I guess that's really changed, I think, because over the last few decades, a lot of the real estate, particularly in Brooklyn, isn't owned by individuals anymore. It's like owned by, you know, companies or like gangs of guys, you know, and you don't have the one-on-one relationship with your landlord anymore. So, you know, they're not, a company isn't in a position to just like, I guess, just like let some guy they've never met face to face be up on their roof and doing this thing, you know? So, and I think that's a big part of gentrification is kind of the loss of family-owned real estate in Brooklyn neighborhoods, you know? And not a month goes by that you don't hear about someone getting kicked off the roof. Like, at this point, most of my friends have been kicked off the roof, and it's a damn shame. And they've either had to move to other neighborhoods or relocated out of town. My main mentor, who's like a Southside Bushwick, born and raised, you know, guys, I was like Bushwick as it gets. Like I don't know, 48 years old. He got kicked off so many roofs 2 years ago. He was like, screw it, and moved with his family down to the, you know, rural South Carolina just so he could fly pigeons because he couldn't. He didn't want to put up with it anymore. I think I guess I'm really lucky that I have a really cool landlord who lives, you know, I just live in a little like 3-story apartment on each, and he's just like a super cool guy, family man on the ground floor, and lets us do it, and will be for the foreseeable future because we, you know, do the things I listed, like we fix stuff up. And yeah, I think also past, and then on top of that, you just have less people getting into it because there's a lot more, you know, the city is kind of a buffet for hobbies, you know, like you could have any number of hobbies. So a lot of kids who used to start doing it just because they're like, dads would do it or their uncles or someone on the block. Now they're like, I don't want to do that. You know, I want to go do whatever else, you know, play Minecraft or something. I don't know, whatever else, you know? So there aren't a lot of young people getting into it, and a lot of the kind of lifer guys, and most guys who start doing it, they kind of become de facto lifers. A lot of the lifers are getting kicked off the roof and kind of forced into like tricky situations. But you also get now in the kind of current world of New York pigeon keeping is you have a lot of team roofs or team coops, where like 4 or 5 guys will go in on a roof together, and they'll have a big coop up there, you know, and they'll have 1,000 birds split between 5 guys' responsibility, you know, and they've got their kids helping them out, like shoveling out the coop and stuff. And you kind of have, so you have these like pigeon coop monopolies. Like there's a few of these on Central, like on the M line, what's it called, on Myrtle, like around Central and Knickerbocker. They're like these 2 kind of warring monopolies over there, where like thousands of pigeons on these roofs. Or there's another big one on Star Street by the Marie Hernandez Park. There's like a roof up there that like 6 guys are a part of or something. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what people do. They kind of, you get your one roof that you can use, and then you kind of pool your resources to it. And also, and some people now, because they can't find landlords who will let them do it on a residential, they'll talk to the manager of an industrial building, you know, like there's a cement factory up in Bushwick, or there's a grocery store in Bushwick, I know, where a guy flies pigeons on the roof, and he just went straight to the manager of the grocery store and was like, hey, would you mind? And like struck up whatever kind of deal he struck up. And that person kind of let him do it because the actual building owner is none the wiser, you know, like people who run Key Foods don't know what's going on, you know?
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello,
Hi.
I can hear you.
Thanks so much for all of this. I'm just wondering, so you keep talking about like the men involved in raising pigeons, and I was wondering what the scene looks like for women involved in raising pigeons.
My 2 favorite people in the world are female pigeon flyers. One is Lisa, who runs the pigeon shop, Broadway Bird and Feed in Bushwick, and she's kind of like the central figure in the Bushwick scene, because as the proprietor of the shop, she's kind of like, you know, she's like the DJ, you know, like everyone kind of knows the DJ because they connect all the groups or whatever. She's awesome. And also, I have a friend, not in New York, but out in LA, who raises and flies pigeons. And maybe some of you are friends with her too, Sonia, who runs Cumties, clothing company, incredible artist. She flies pigeons and always has, and which is awesome because she's maybe one of the few people I know who's a pigeon keeper and also a kind of contemporary artist and has that overlap. But I mean, and short of those examples, like I've met other women who fly pigeons. My partner, my girlfriend Maddie, at this point counts as one of them, I guess. But it is certainly a boys' club on the whole, at least in New York. That said, it's as ethnically and economically diverse as you could get. White guy is by far the minority, particularly like a kind of non-ethnic white guy, you know, like my buddies who fly, you know, I have like Italian and Polish and Russian friends who fly pigeons, but they're like Italian and Polish and Russian, you know, like they're not, like I'm just like, I'm Irish, but like I'm like suburban American, you know, to the point where my nickname in the Brooklyn scene, like for better or worse, or like it or not, is White Pat. That's what everyone calls me, and they have for years. And that's because there's already Jamaican Pat and Saudi Pat. So I'm White Pat. But yeah, there aren't, or I'd also to amend that, I think I've met dozens and dozens of women who keep pigeons, but don't fly them in mass on the roof the way like the Bushwick guys do, or like the kind of the pigeon flyer does. But yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hey, Pat, could you, I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier talking about different games and different boroughs, but could you talk about the differences, if there are any, between like the Bronx scene, the Brooklyn
Sure.
scene, if there's a Queens scene or Staten Island?
Oh, there's a scene for all of them. The only place that doesn't have a scene, sadly, is Manhattan. But, you know, like that kind of goes across the board, I think, at this point. But so, and I could show you some of the breeds that correspond with the boroughs. So the big thing in Brooklyn, in Bushwick, in Canarsie, in Bed-Stuy, and Sunset Park are flights and rollers. So a lot of my birds are rollers. I was put on by a roller guy. That's a roller. That's a roller. Those are rollers. The ones with solid white heads are rollers. That's a very, very Brooklyn bird. They fly very acrobatically, and like it's kind of dazzling to watch. They go up, I'd say, like they'll go like maybe 100 feet up, a couple 100 feet up on a good day. But they're kind of a little bit lower, you know, imagine like 10 stories above your roof, bobbing and weaving and cutting and moving across really fast. All is like a synchronized. You see it in Bushwick from the elevated trains. They look like tornadoes of birds flying, and those are pigeons. And that's kind of like how rollers and flights fly. Flights are, I think, favored in Brooklyn because except their colors are particularly like flashy and kind of sexy. They have these really like bright dotted colors and these long cherry red beaks. And I think that's a favorite in Brooklyn because like style in general, like, or a high sense of style is favored in Brooklyn. In the Bronx, there's a huge rivalry between Brooklyn guys and Bronx guys. In the Bronx, they mainly fly tiplets. Like this one here is a tiplet. Let's see, I have a bunch of tiplets. That one right there with the black bars is a tiplet. That black one.
They almost look like street pigeons, the triplets.
They look a little like street pigeons. You know, I have ones in here that are like bronze and grizzle, or like this white one on top is a kind of tiplet. So like a bald head roller, tiplet, bald head roller, roller. The tiplets are known for flying for a really, really long time. So like, you know, you'll let them out in the morning and they'll just go up there, and guys will literally sit on the roof and count the minutes that they fly. And then on the weekend, the bragging rights at the shop is, oh, my birds did 3 hours without coming down, or my birds did 2 hours. And, you know, everyone's like, no, they didn't. You know, there's always like banter about how long birds can fly for, like as a group, you know, and And also those birds can fly really, really high. And when the pigeons they go so far up, I'm talking like hundreds of stories up, to the point where they just become these tiny little specks that you could only see when they hook the right way in the sun, and the sun catches the whites of their underwing. And we call it the pins, when the birds fly up to their little dots. And the Bronx guys favor birds that fly to the pins. In Queens, you have also high flyers, but kind of weirder varieties. I definitely have some. This one up there on the top, right there, that's a Pakistani high flyer, which is actually a super rare and coveted bird in most of the burrows. That's a Pakistani right there. They fly really high, but they won't fly in big groups. They kind of stick there like in little teams, or we call them kits, like when it's just like 5 birds or 10 birds on their own little mission. The flights in the rollers, they'll mob up. You know, you'll have like a flock. We call flock stocks. So you'll have a stock of like 300 birds all kind of flying together. That's kind of like the Brooklyn thing. And also in the more suburban parts of Queens, also Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and in Staten Island, you have guys who are into the homing pigeons and are active pigeon racers. And that's, you know, obviously they're pigeon keepers, and there's a world of overlap. It's still kind of like a whole separate sport. Like the coops look different. The way you care for the animals is different. You feed them different things. You give them different supplements in their water. It's a much more expensive pastime. It takes a lot of money, kind of. And it's, in New York, at least, it's more of like a gentleman's pastime. And those guys, you know, they race. They'll have fewer birds. They'll just have 20 birds that they really like OD on. And they'll look kind of like basic pigeons, but like big and beefy. And you'll see they have these big white schnozzes. They're called sears. So I have a bunch of homers, but not many yet. This is a homer, and that's a homer, that blue bar with the little pretty white dash by his eye. That's a homer right there, that huge gray one. The homers are big, and I was kind of nervous putting the homers in this coop with all the other ones. Normally they're separate in their own coops because, you know, they're kind of like linebackers. And not that they're more aggressive necessarily, they're just bigger. And like with animals, you have all these kind of basic things you got to worry about, like survival of the fittest and all this really like attitude sometimes. But they're all doing really good. But yeah, that's kind of like racing pigeons, at least in New York. It's a little bit more gentlemanly. It's also a little bit more white. It's a little bit more like, maybe not white, but like retired Italian doctor who lives in Staten Island kind of guy races pigeons. Whereas like flights and tiplets and all these other birds I'm talking about, that's more of like, you know, like Joe the super or Mike the union electrician, you know, kind of like, I don't know, more normal people, I guess, and less doctors and superhero people like that.
Blue collar birds.
Yeah. And in New York, it's really blue collar. And then in different countries have whole different attitudes to it. Like in Belgium is historically the pigeon racing capital of the world. They kind of modernized the sport in the 19th century. And you could buy Belgian racing pigeons that look just like a street pigeon, like at least same colors, you know, different kind of physique and build, but the same, that like bluish gray. But they'll come from so-and-so's bloodline from Antwerp, and it's the great times 20 granddaughter of a Van Jensen from the 1870s. And that bird will literally sell for $500,000 US to a Chinese businessman who's like, you know, racing the big money races out in the East, you know, like China, Taiwan, Singapore, they had big money, gnarly races out there. In China, they don't really race horses the way they do in the West. So the kind of alternative, like rich guy animal sport is racing pigeons. It's super common there. And you have, you know, if your bird wins a race, it'd be like winning the Kentucky Derby. You'll get $1 million, and that bird will get like a trophy and go in the Pigeon Hall of Fame or whatever. And then other places have their own way to do it. Cairo does it similar to New York, just with those incredible Mad Max pigeon coops where they're way up high. But their catch keep is how they do it. In England, they have competitions in England and in LA, South LA, like Compton has a really interesting pigeon world where they fly these deep spinners, they're called. So while the bird's flying, and they're all flying together, they start literally throwing backflips. And I have birds that do that, but they'll fly and they'll like do a backflip and keep going. In LA, the deep spinners, they go, woo, and they just drop. And they measure, like the sport there or the game is raising birds that can flip the longest. And they'll measure it in the lengths of telephone pole. So they'll be like, oh, this bird here can do 5 poles, meaning she could flip the equivalent length of 5 telephone poles, which would be like 100 feet or whatever. And that's what they kind of nerd out on as a community there. And I could go on and on. Different places do it different ways. Yeah.
Do you know anything about like pigeons, like delivery pigeons for like male pigeons, and if there's a history of that?
Well, there's a huge history. So in the beginning, I mentioned that, pigeons started delivering not mail like a national post office level, but started delivering mail amongst communities like many thousands of years ago in Sumeria or in Babylon. And that in time became like a formalized practice. And up until very recent, up until 10 years ago, there was the last functioning pigeon post office was in Kerala, India, the south of India, where it was like if you had a letter and your letter had to go to Bombay or whatever, like you went to your post office and they strapped it on a pigeon's leg, or they rewrote the letter in an itty bitty scroll and they tied it to the pigeon's leg, and it would fly that thing to Bombay like same day. And like that was a practicing post office until like 2005 or something, until pretty modern times. And then there's, there are the famous pigeons, the Signal Corps of the U.S. Army and the English Army and the German Army had a Signal Corps, and they flew messages in times of war. I mean, I guess I would assume most all armies or air forces, whatever, up until modern times had a Signal Corps, but they were definitely a huge part of communications in World War I and to a lesser degree, but in World War II. And there are many famous wartime pigeons that are worth reading about, like that have, that saved countless lives and like flew from the battlefield and like got their wings blown off, but kept going and still delivered the message. And then, died in bed receiving the message, whatever. And they're like immortalized in bronze in the Smithsonian and stuff. There's a bunch of those pigeons. And the Army Signal Corps officially closed in, I think, like the early 60s or the late 50s. But to this day, the American military and presumably other militaries still, actively and openly experiments with utilizing pigeons in, times of war for whatever ends, And there are famous scientists who have contributed to the war effort, like B.F. Skinner and Tesla, who contributed to the war efforts in respect to pigeons and their knowledge of pigeons or whatever in the past.
So the last 5 minutes, do you want to show us some? We went over the half an hour. We went by half an hour over the half an hour. No, don't worry. That's totally fine. Do you want to show us like some of your favorite pigeons in the last 5 minutes?
Sure. Okay. Hang on. All right. This bird is really special to me. My friend, the guy I mentioned, Batman Louie, my mentor, who moved to South Carolina, he came back. He took a road trip up from South Carolina a few months ago, and he brought me this bird. This bird was born in South Carolina. It's a capuchin with that incredible hairdo. And see, she's like a really beautiful red lace. and I named her Dondi after the legendary Brooklyn graffiti writer from the late 70s, who pretty much like modernized graffiti painting on trains. But he was a famous pigeon keeper, and in many interviews talks about, people ask like, hey Dondi, like how'd you get into painting, like why'd you paint? And his answer was always, oh well, I needed something to do at night because I couldn't be in the coop with the birds. So like graffiti just became like a pastime between raising birds. So that's Dondi.
Somebody asked, can pigeons carry coronavirus? Someone just asked on the chat.
Well, I hope not. I hope not. I don't know.
They can. We're all doomed.
Presumably not, because pigeons, there's like many illnesses that a pigeon can have, and they could be transferred to other birds pretty quickly, actually, like if from sharing their own water, from being in contact with birds. But there's no illness you could get from a pigeon short of like eating it, the same way if you ate like a bad chicken, you could get like E. coli, but you can't get a sickness from them from like touching their poop or from being around them or breathing their dander. But you can have lung problems the same way you'd have lung problems if you were in any dusty place. It's just the dust. So presumably, even if they had coronavirus, they couldn't give it to us unless we ate it, I think. Oh, this one.
Nice grab.
Yeah, thanks. This is a really beautiful roller. I love the really wild colorways. So this is called like a pencil mosaic. I'm done. And see like the crazy color splash. That's really hard to achieve. That bird came from someone else's bloodline. I didn't raise that. And I showed you the Egyptian swift. I don't know. Here, I'll just hold the camera around. So that's, I can't get close because they fly away. So those guys are cute. See, look at the size of the nose on those guys. Those are serious racing homers. This one has really...
Were those a couple, those two?
Yeah, that's a couple, yeah. The gray guy and the white bar lady.
Cute.
This guy has funny feathery feet. That's a crossbreed. That would make a normal pigeon breeder pretty aghast because it's a mix between some things. That's kind of oddball, but she's awesome and loyal. This one's really cute. That's a solid white archangel with a really nice hairdo. That's called a crown or a cap.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Hi, Pat. This is incredible. I didn't know anything about pigeons, so this might sound really ignorant, but how often do they need to fly? Like, because presumably, the nature of birds is to fly. Like, how often, how much time can they spend kind of indoors?
Well, I guess I don't mean this in like a good way, but presumably for like taking the word can literally, they could live in this coop forever. The coop they're in right now with enough space to fly. And it's not going to be of like physical detriment to them. Maybe they'll get like fat and lazy, but they're not going to be like, they're not going to have
a nervous breakdown.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not going to like deteriorate and die because they can't be in the sky. Okay. That said, on a normal day-to-day, when my birds are normally, on my roof in Bushwick, I fly them every day of the week in the warm weather and like every other day or every few days, like in the winter and the cold. Okay. A lot of guys in New York won't fly their birds at all through the winter because there are so many hawks and falcons that come. And it becomes like a daily thing watching one of your birds get taken away, like in the air. That's also kind of an interesting thing. New York City has the largest population of peregrine falcons in the entire country, and they're the fastest animal in the world. And they're pretty effing small. They're just a little bit bigger than pigeons. But when you see them fly side by side, especially when you spend a lot of time watching birds fly, like in any capacity, those falcons, like it's something when they do like Rocket Man and they dive. crazy. So for a lot of guys, they just shut them in for 3 months, you know, and let them have babies or focus on other things and not fly. And, you know, that does no harm to them, short of maybe.
Well, why? Because hawks like fly more during the winter, like the predators?
Yeah, it's twofold because it's their breeding time. You know, a lot of animals breed naturally when it's colder because colder is cleanlier. Like the cold, especially the deep cold in the north, kills disease and, like, you know, kills bad things around your baby. So they breed, and also a lot of their normal food, like the ground critters, like squirrels and rats and things like this, that, you know, they get out of the park, they're in hibernation, or at least they're maybe not in hibernation, but, you know, they're not around. Like they're buried in snow, or they're holed up somewhere. So they learn where the pigeon keepers are, and they kind of, you know, like prey on us the same way, I guess, like a shark would prey on a school of fish or something. And it's a lot easier for them to go after our pigeons because they're high flying and they live in mass. And I mean, heck, a smart hawk could even figure out the time of day those pigeons are going to be let out, because for most guys, it's like a ritualized time, and they'll just come hunting at that time. And you can't really beat the hawk forever, but your birds can fly well enough to outmaneuver him most days of the week. But you definitely lose birds in the winter, and that's kind of, I don't know, that's Mother Nature being herself or whatever.
So Pat, to follow up on that, hey guys, I'm AJ. I have a very small coop out in Rockaway Beach, Queens. I actually messaged you on Instagram a few weeks ago. I have 2 old German owl pigeons.
Awesome.
So
Weirdos.
They just showed up.
They got the puffy chests.
Yeah, and you were talking with the crown.
Feathers that come out like this.
I was going to chime in before with the frill. They have like almost like a little mohawk. They're beautiful birds.
Yeah.
So they just showed up in my bungalow. I'm out here in Rockaway, and I really had no idea about like pigeons or anything. So, you know, I was taking care of them. They were living outside all summer up on my roof. So finally I got a little coop, built a little something for them, trapped them. So back to the hawks. This winter, there's been these hawks are everywhere out here, and there'll be one I have them in the garage now because I moved the coop into the garage just for their safety. And I let them free fly like last month when it was beautiful one day, and I was kind of spooked out because I'm right on the bayside and these hawks are just everywhere. So like I've been seeing this hawk every couple mornings just hanging out on top of the garage, almost like he knows that they're in there. So with this quarantine, I've rigged up a rope from my kitchen window that like hits like a loud piece of like metal sign, like a bus sign that I have. So this hawk will fly off. So now I'm just not even letting the birds, you know, I'm just going to keep them tight and keep them in the garage safe, and they're happy in there. Yeah. They're flying around. So I have it all chicken wired up in my garage.
That's awesome.
But now they've been breeding like crazy, and like it's like a problem. It's not a problem. It's awesome. But I have a lot of eggs. I'm giving eggs out to people, some other bird guys that I know.
Which is a thing. Yeah.
You know, so a lot of guys have been coming getting eggs because it's just too many eggs.
And German owls are kind of weird.
They're very friendly birds.
Yeah, and for everyone, picture a German owl. Their feathers on their chest kind of come out like this, and they're really like bosomy. Not like a full fantail, but they're kind of like and they're kind of fancy, and they have feathery feet sometimes. And they're not too common in the city where guys really want like performance birds, like birds that fly hard. But some guys will keep them. We call it a chico. It's the bird that you use to lure in your other birds. So all your birds are out flying, or maybe they're on the roof. You take like a big, fat, funny-looking pigeon, and you put him out or her out, and she kind of immediately goes in and kind of like signals to the other pigeons that it's the time to go inside or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you should be careful because they're not the most nimble of pigeons and could get got by a hawk really easy.
They're very gullible.
They're kind of chubby.
Doofy,
yeah,
you know?
They're cute. Yeah.
I'm sending some photos now.
Sonia Cumtees has a lot of those. So that's kind of that's like her main. She's big on the owls, owl pigeons. And also you touched on something that's really a huge part of this that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's like the jerry rigging, like you're talking about your rope and how it hits the trap door. Like for me, and I'd say for most pigeon keepers, the kind of daily need to jerry rig and the bricolage and the kind of like cobble things together is part of the thrill or part of the interest in it. Like you're always fixing something, and especially like, you know, you're building these things that are up on the roof and they're all in the elements, you know, they're all they're constantly, oh, that's them, right on. Yeah. Beautiful.
Betty and George.
Like you're always trying to find a balance between like letting Mother Nature be as beautiful and as magnificent as it is, but also like keeping it from killing you and keeping it from like eating your pigeon coop or like, you know, we had a good winter on that note. It was a really nice winter to be a pigeon keeper in New York City because there was no snow to shovel off the roof. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, those guys are living large.
Yeah, they're hanging out. You know, I had a bird guy come by when I was still early on, and I was like, oh, they, you know, are they stressed out in here? They can't fly. They can't go out and fly. And he was like, kid, these birds are in the Ritz-Carlton. Just to refresh back, you said very Staten Island guys. He was a very Italian Staten Island guy who knows birds, who's been doing birds forever. And he was like, kid, these birds are in the Ritz-Carlton. They're fine. Let them have babies. So, I mean, cool. I have eggs, man. If you ever want to come out this summer.
I would love to, man. I'd love to.
They're going to be mating. I've been feeding them the calcium grit to help with, you know, the eggs and everything. So,
right, I'll trade you some. I'll trade you some eggs from whatever. And this is like a thing.
I only have these 2 birds, man. I kind of want to.
That's all you are. I hear you.
I just want to raise. I want to raise owls. You know, like I wish I had the space like you do, but I just don't. You know.
Sure.
But I appreciate it. I'll just give you eggs, man. It's all good if you want some owls.
Very cool.
You know.
I appreciate it. And I should say for the crowd, this is like a thing, like pigeons kind of, like, how do I say, like a pigeon keeper, a pigeon flyer never really possesses their birds. Like I don't feel ownership over them. I feel responsible for them, but not, because when you let your birds fly, like they leave all the time. And it's kind of every time they're up in the air, it's on them whether they come back or not. You know, it's not like having a dog or even like a field of cows where it's like that's Lassie or that's cow number 6. They're kind of like, they kind of come and go, and the way they kind of, you know, they could go and live on someone else's roof and then come back to you a year later, and guys will kind of, there's a whole little kind of economy of it, of like selling birds either to each other, to the shop, or trading for birds, or bestowing a younger guy with some birds that maybe have like one feather that's the wrong color, but you give it to the new kid who's coming up. And you know, guys did that to me, and I do that to other guys now. And yeah, there's kind of like, there's a pigeon trade, there's a bird trade or whatever. Thanks everyone. I hope everyone's doing well and staying safe and sane and making stuff. It's a really good time to make stuff, I think. Zines, it's a good time to make zines, photograph them and share them on Instagram, I guess.
Bye.
Thank you, Pat. See ya.
Bye. Thanks so much. Stay well.